So listen, today we are towards the end of, actually I just kind of jumped forward a couple chapters to kind of wrap up our study in Acts. Hope that you enjoyed this. Next week will actually be our final message. And then in the beginning of November, we're starting a brand new series. We're just in the planning stages of it right now. And it's going to be kind of based off of a book by Bob Goff. I remember Bob Goff from Love Does. He wrote a book, Everybody Always, meaning he's saying this: love everybody always. Pretty simple, right? Who should I love? Everybody. When? Always. And so he wrote a book, and we're going to do maybe a 5 or 6 part series based on the book, and so we're looking forward to that. So today, what we're at is in Acts chapter 27, and we're going to be talking about, in this story where Paul is heading to Rome. We'll get into that in a minute. Let me ask you a question, though, to start out. How are you feeling about the future? How are you feeling about your future, number one? Do you feel encouraged about the future? Do you feel hopeful? And that kind of ebbs and flows, doesn't it? Based on how your life situation is. Sometimes we go through things where the future doesn't look so certain. And you may be a bit nervous about the future. At one time you might be excited about the possibilities. Now you're anxious about what may happen, or maybe you feel discouraged. Chances are in here we have enough people that there's probably a wide range of emotion about the future. That's your own personal future. What about the future of America? Well, depending on who you are, depending on your kind of persuasion, you may feel encouraged about the future of America. You may feel discouraged about the future of America, right? Isn't that right? It's been that way for how many years now? Depending on what political persuasion you happen to be aligned with. The truth is this, and we all know this, that the future is uncertain. That none of us we can lay the best plans, but it's still uncertain. And we know this, we know that the storms of life are going to come. As a pastor, I run into, most of the times people don't come to me when their life is going good, knock on the door and say, hey pastor, I'll tell you how good my life is. It doesn't happen that way. I wish it would. I wish people would tell me the good things too, because you need to hear that, don't you? If you constantly just hear the negative, you think, well, everything's bad. And I know that's not true. I know that when people need help and people come with marriage issues, marriage problems, or health issues, I get a lot of prayer requests for, especially as we get older, we face different things in our life, and I get a lot of prayer requests for health issues. Oftentimes it's a wayward child, or job-related issues. Can tell you how many times I've gotten phone calls that, hey, my husband just got laid off and we don't know what we're going to do, and right? And these things come up in our life, these unexpected issues, problems at work, problems with the boss, problem with a employee, problems with a coworker. And so we face these things in life, don't we? We all do. And maybe right now you're here and I have touched on something that you're going through right now at this very moment, and your ears are kind of perked up and you're going, yeah, that's me. But maybe I said all these things and you're going, no, pretty much, life's pretty good right now, and that's great. I'm glad it is. But I want you to pay attention, because I think this is an important message, because chances are that you will face something in the future. We'll face something in the future. And the questions are like this: how will you face your next storm? How will you face it? Do you think about the next storm at all? I'm not saying that you're a pessimist and you're always thinking about the bad things that can happen. That's not what I'm talking about. But there's something to be said about the preparedness for a storm, right? If you're watching the news and they're talking about a hurricane coming in, the best thing you can do is not ignore it, not put your head in the sand, is prepare for it. Isn't that right? So you see people in Louisiana and Florida and the Carolinas, in Texas, in different places, and there's a storm predicted to come. And so people start taking the necessary steps. They start boarding up their windows, and they start tying things down, and they start making plans, escape routes, and different things like that. Well, I think it's important in life too, to not that we can know what's going to come up, but kind of mentally be ready for the storms of life that come. So obviously we're looking at, what does the Bible have to say about this? So I'm reminded of a movie. How many like movies? Like going to movies? So obviously you're all going to know this movie that speaks of these storms of life. How many remember the movie Forrest Gump? Remember the movie Forrest Gump? Well, I think this movie, did it resonate with you at all, Forrest Gump? I think it does. I mean, it did for me. It really resonated with me in the sense that he went through so many different things in his life, and no matter what issue or what difficulty he faced, somehow, if you remember the movie, somehow he was able to kind of overcome, didn't he? He overcame somehow. It's kind of like, I remember the old TV show Gomer Pyle. Remember Gomer Pyle? Gomer Pyle was always getting into something messed up, but it always kind of worked out in the end somehow. And Gomer ended up always looking good, right? But think about the movie for a minute. He was born with a physical deformity, and he had to wear leg braces. Right? So from an early age, he started out with a storm in life, a difficulty in life. He had no father. He was kind of relatively poor. He was mentally challenged. When you watch the movie, you know that other kids bullied him. And then he has to go off to Vietnam. And in Vietnam, his best friend gets killed in Vietnam, Bubba. And then Captain Dan, you remember Captain Dan? Captain Dan, he lost his legs in an explosion. And yet Forrest somehow was able to always have a positive outlook in life. But at one point when he lost his girl, you remember that? Remember she got involved in drugs and a lifestyle that a lifestyle of just bad choices. The movie symbolically, I think, depicts Forrest as running away. And I think we all can relate to that as well. Sometimes things can get to a place in our life. Just think of your own life. Do you ever feel like that? Do you ever feel like, man, I just want to get away. I just want to run away. Somehow it seems like that's somehow the only answer sometimes, to run away from your past, to run away from the problems in life. I think we all can identify with that. I have the clip. Mind if we watch the clip together? Let's play that clip. I have some subtitles there. Go ahead.
Anyway, like I was saying, I had a lot of company. My mom always said, you got to put the past behind you before you can move on. And I think that's what my running was all about. I had run for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours.
Quiet, he's gonna say something.
I'm pretty tired. Think I'll go home now.
Now what are we supposed to do?
And just like that, my running days was over. Anyway, like I was saying,
In the Bible, the prodigal, right? When he was running, he got to a place, he said, you know what, I'm just tired. I'm just tired. I think I'm going to go home. I think we all resonate with that to a certain degree. And so the title of my message today is Bob Seger, Forrest, Gump, and the Apostle Paul. Because you heard the song playing in the background, right? Bob Seger's song, Running Against the Wind. And I think we all can identify with those words too. Listen, he said, I found myself further and further from home. Right? And that's what Forrest was, running from his problems. And we find ourselves doing that in life. And he said, I lost my way. There are so many roads. And I was running against the wind. Running against the wind. You know, Carl, I'm going to put a plug in for Carl's Bible study. I say Bible study. His group that meets on Wednesdays. Won't be meeting this week, Carl, right? But the following week. The following he'll be meeting. And he's talking about, the subject matter is the Holy Spirit. So your question might be, well, what are we going to talk about? Yeah, that's the problem. You know, do you talk about what the Holy Spirit is, who he is, or how he's in our life? But the funny thing about talking about the Spirit is, it's more important to experience the Spirit than to talk about the Spirit. And so Carl's going to be I'm sure he's talking about how is it that we interact with the Spirit in our life? How is it that, or when, I may want to know when it's the Spirit and when it's you. That's what we want to know, right? When am I being led by the Spirit? But when I think of this, so listen, so in the Bible, when the Spirit is talked about, it's talked about like this. It's talked about like wind or breath. That's how the Spirit's talked about. It's not talked about as a personification, right? And it talks about the wind, like how does the Spirit work? Well, we don't know. Where does the wind come from? Well, I don't know where it comes from. Where did it start? I don't know. Where's it going? I don't know. But you know it when you feel it, don't you? You feel that wind. And so when I think of this message, and I think of the wind of the Spirit, and sometimes, at least in my own life, I can't speak for you, in my own life, I think I find myself fighting against the wind of the Spirit. Fighting against it. Not a good thing, right? What we want to do is we want to somehow go with the flow of the Spirit. Where's the wind of the Spirit blowing? I want to move. Wouldn't that make sense to want to do that, right? I want to move with the Spirit. Which way is the Spirit blowing? It's never a good idea to go against it. But the song goes on and offers a glimmer of hope. It said, I began to find myself searching, and I think that that's where we all need to be constantly, is say, I'm searching. What am I searching for? Well, I'm searching for more. It's not enough, friends, to say, well, I'm a Christian, I'm born again. What I mean by that is life is more than just this acknowledgement of who God is. God wants to be a part of your life by the Spirit indwelling in us and showing us the best way of giving us abundant life, abundance of joy, abundance of peace, no matter how old you are, no matter how young you are or how old, no matter what you're going through. The promise, and we're going to get into that in the message, the promise is this: I'll never leave you. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I think what we're looking for sometimes is for the magic touch and for God to get us out of the situation. And I don't know why, but for the most part, I think, he doesn't work that way, at least in my experience, getting you out of something. Getting you through something, oh yeah, he's an expert at that. He's an expert at helping you through those storms in life. I began to find myself searching for shelter. What I'm going to be encouraging you in today's message is actually with a question: where are you looking for your shelter? Because we've all been there. We've all tried to run away from our problems. We've all, let's face it, we've all lost our way at times. We've taken the wrong road. We've broken some rules. Anybody? Nobody? Just me? Me and Maria. Thank you, Maria, for that hand. We've broken some rules. We've found ourselves in places maybe we shouldn't be, in positions where we didn't want to be in. You might even be there now. Today, you might be running against the wind. Maybe it's a raging storm in your life. And here's the thing. Here's what I want you to know. Sometimes we find ourselves in storms of life, no fault of our own. Isn't that right? No fault of our own. And we think, someone tells us that God is there for us. He's going to see you through this storm. He's going to promise. And you go, well, I should hope so, right? I should hope he does, because I didn't ask for this. I didn't get myself into this. Okay, let's just set that aside for a minute. How about the times when you got yourself into the jam? How many of you feel, don't raise your hand, how many of you feel like, well, I got myself in this, I got to get myself out? And those are the times where I'm not going to ask God to help me with this. I got myself into this. Sure, he's saying, that's your problem. I want you to know that even in those times, even when you have got yourself into the jam all on your own, bad choices, right? Bad investments, bad moves, bad relationships, whatever it is, you got yourself into it. I want you to know he's always waiting. He said, I'll never leave you. And I'll never forsake you. I'm there to help you in all the storms of life. Maybe a bad decision has come back to haunt you. Maybe a sickness has arrived. Maybe a relationship is crumbling right before your eyes. Maybe you're facing failure in your life and you're searching for shelter. You're searching for relief from those things. Going into an uncertain future based on God and not your feelings is the answer. I'll say it again. When you were going into an uncertain future, basing everything you have, all your hopes, all your dreams, everything, basing them on God and not on your feelings is the answer. Okay, so let's recap a bit, okay? So last week we left off Paul. He was in Ephesus, and he was dealing with some issues of idolatry in Ephesus. And today, right before our story today, Paul decided to go back to Jerusalem. Everybody was saying it was a bad idea. But Paul wanted to go back to Jerusalem. The crowds were wanting to kill him. The Romans had arrested him. There were assassins that vowed to kill him. And he is held now, up to this point, he's held in prison for 2 long years. Kind of protective custody. They just didn't know what to do with Paul. I hope you've been reading along. You've been keeping up with the story. Paul was put on trial before the king of Judea. Just he was Felix and Festus and Agrippa. Right, he's put on trial. The Roman governor, and they concluded that really Paul had really done nothing wrong, but Paul had made a legal appeal to sit before Caesar. So to Caesar, Paul must go. So Paul is put on a ship and it's bound for Rome. So he's in the Mediterranean. How many of you would like to go on a Mediterranean cruise? I certainly would. I think Paul was probably thinking, just this half of the room, they're not. I don't think they're paying attention. I don't know. What did he say? What did he say about a cruise? Paul's probably thinking, prison, 2 years. Mediterranean cruise, that'd be nice. I don't think so, Paul. I don't think it's going to go that way. And so he is put on this ship, and he even advises against things in this whole scenario. But they start to head into what we now can see is the storm of the century, heading into what is called a nor'eastern. And so listen how Luke's with him, and Luke's writing this. These are some of the phrases that Luke used. He said that Paul was heading against the wind and certainly sailing into an uncertain future. And Luke says this, the winds were against us. We took a violent battering from the storm. Who's we? All of them. Paul included, Luke included, we finally gave up all hope. Have you ever felt like that? Ever felt like the storm is just, it seemed like everywhere I turn, everything is against me. Every circumstance is against me. Everyone is against me. And you're taking such a beating in life, you get to the place where you say, all hope is lost. I'm done. Well, Paul goes from this lengthy imprisonment to a prison ship. Let me just read a couple. I was going to read the whole story. Let me just read a couple passages from this for you, okay? Acts 27 says this, the winds were against us. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete, which is the southern part of Crete. We moved along the coast with difficulty. Much time had been lost. That's the beginning of 27, 4 through 9. Then it says, so Paul warned them, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also. Verse 11. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot. Why the pilot? Well, he's the expert, isn't he? Followed the advice of the expert and the owner of the ship. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force called a northeaster swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. Today I want to look at three very, very simple ideas that as I read this story, that I kind of extract from the story, that I want to just elaborate on just a little bit. And maybe we can just use it as some good advice for life when we face life storms. The first thing is this, ask yourself a question in the storm, what can I do? What can I do? Because let's face it, and a lot of times in the storms of life, there's a lot you can't do, isn't that true? But what can you do? In the story it said this, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. The men hoisted it aboard. Then they passed ropes under the ship itself and held it together. Let me just tell you something about. So they've uncovered ships from this era. They uncovered one that was the length of a football field. The thing about this, I don't know what you think about when you think about a ship in the Mediterranean. I don't know if you think of a big, huge, how many have been on a cruise before? A big, huge metal cruise ship, you know, it wasn't like that. It was more like a barge. You've seen the barges go down the Mon? More like a barge. It was more flat, kind of the side just come up a little bit, right? It wasn't meant to weather storms. And so there were some 270 some people aboard this ship. And what they had to do is they were always prepared to do this for storms. They would pass ropes underneath the ship, bring it up to try to hold it together. They were made out of wood. They were more like almost like a flat bottom boat, almost like a giant skiff. Just kind of come up like this. It says, then they passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. They were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. So here's the thing, friends. What is it that you can do in the storm? one of the things they did is they lowered an anchor. Now, I know this. I know I'm using this as metaphor, right? But I read that and I think, what is it in the storms of life that when we go through, what are some practical things that we can do? And maybe you could think of some of those things on your own. But I tend to always move towards relationships. Why is it that in the storms, especially if it's a storm, especially if it's something that we have sort of caused ourselves, what we have a tendency to do, right? Tendencies, is to remove ourselves from the relationships that can help. I don't know why that is. I don't know why we have a tendency to separate ourselves. Maybe it has to do with shame or guilt. Shame and guilt are funny things, aren't they? Make you do some as you look back, make you do some dumb things. I never should have done that. But shame in our life. Wow. The embarrassment. I did that. And so we avoid, right? We avoid the anchors in our life. Those people who are close to us. Listen, if those who are close to you, right? Those who you deem your closest friends, if they find out these kind of things about you, that maybe you got yourself into trouble and you caused all this, listen, a true friend, a real friend is going to stay right there with you. And they're going to be your anchor. And they're going to be your support through this time. That's what you need. That's what you need. But we have a tendency to avoid the very help that's right there for us. What can I do? Well, what I can do is I can go to those who love me. I can do that. I can talk to them. I can share my problems with them. What else can I do? I can listen. I can sit and listen to good advice, good counsel. Now, the interesting thing about this is Paul said, listen, I've spent some time praying. I've spent some time, listen, I believe God's saying this, right? I believe God's saying we shouldn't go. Oh, no. I talked to the pilot and I talked to the owner of the ship. Who are those? Well, those are the experts. What are the experts saying? In these times, you don't need an expert, do you? What you need somebody who's hearing from God. You need somebody who is close to God. Somebody who you can say, listen, no, that's faulty thinking. Oh, God doesn't care. God doesn't love me. Why did God? No. That's faulty thinking. Let me remind you of what God says about you. See, that's what you need during those times, isn't it? You need somebody to remind you of true reality. Let me tell you about the God who I serve. Let me tell you about the God who's for you, not against you. And so what can you do during life storms? Man, jot that down. Jot that down, because you'll go through storms and look around and say, okay, what things can I do? Because there's a lot you can't do, right? When you hear the diagnosis of your health, there's a lot you can't do, but there's a lot you can do. There's a lot you can do. The second thing is this. The second thing you need to ask yourself through life storms is this. What can I do without? What can I do without? I love this. This is so rich, and you can kind of read it for yourself and kind of elaborate on it for yourself. Let me read this. So we took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day we began to throw cargo overboard. Cargo. What's cargo in our life? Cargo's a thing you drag with you everywhere you go, right? You move from house to drag cargo. You know what cargo is? You ever drive down the road and see you drive down to 51, you're heading down towards the tunnels, right? There used to be a restaurant down there by the red, white, and blue thrift shop, right? There used to be a restaurant there. You know what it is now? It's a mini storage. A mini storage. Why do we need mini storage? Our houses aren't big enough to hold our stuff. So we have to have a mini storage. Let me ask you a question, just be honest. How many of you have a place somewhere in your house, basement, attic, whatever, there's a pile of stuff, and you have no idea what's in it? Anybody? Exactly right. My whole garage right now is full right now, because we moved. Whole garage is full. Now, we've been living here in our house now for going on close to a year. All the stuff in the garage, I haven't needed for the last year. But I still have it. Why do I need it? I don't know. I don't even know what's even there. I don't even know what's in there. Cargo, right? And so we haul this stuff around with us everywhere we go. And so in the storms of life, we need to ask yourself, listen, what can I let go of? What am I holding on to, right? And I think that's a great time to ask yourself that question. What captured my attention, even my imagination? Boy, it all becomes clear when you go through a hard time. I don't need that, right? What can I let go of? And so they began to throw cargo overboard. Cargo. Now, when times get really bad, watch what they start to throw off. On the third day, they threw off the ship's tackle. What's tackle represent? Tackle represents our means of security, right? Our means of a future, right? Tackle is what you're living with day to day. Listen, when times get really tough, really hard in the storm, you start saying, listen, you may have to go, right? You ever heard of people going to Mexico for treatment? What about your job? I don't care. Listen, tackle overboard. I need to, what can I let go of? I think sometimes we hold on to things so much that we miss the things that are really important in life as well. And they began to throw the ship's tackle overboard. It says with their own hands. What can I do? What can I live without? And the third thing, I already alluded to this, and I'm going to tie it in with last week's message a little bit too about idols. So I don't know if my friend Jeff is watching. I hope he's watching in Florida. He said to Pete afterwards, well, we all like idols. It's not the point of liking idols. And I know what he meant by that, these things that we like, but an idol is something that becomes your all in all. It becomes your most important thing. And so my third point today is, where is my hope? Where is your hope? It said, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. Where do you put your hope? Is your hope in I always say this, listen, I'm not siding anywhere, but is your hope in a political party? Like, really, that's where your hope is? You're believing that if just this happens, if this election goes our way, then everything's going to be okay? Let me tell you, it's going to change again, isn't it? And I'm not saying that it's bad. It may change. It may be good for a while. But what will you do when that changes? And your hope was in that, and now the pendulum swings the other way. Now what will you do? Well, now there's no hope. Today in America, half the population, no hope. The other, hope. Pendulum swings the other way, it just switches. The other half has hope. Is that any way to live? Like, that's no way to live. It shouldn't be the way that as a follower of Jesus lives. Putting your hope in these things. Where is your hope? So last week we talked about it in terms of idols. In terms of idols. But I love this story. Did you read the story? Who read the story? Did you read the story? That's it? Oh, you guys got to read it. Okay, so Paul, what do you think Paul says? They're in the storm. Everybody's there. Everybody who made the choice to go out on the boat. What did Paul say? Paul goes, I told you so. Don't you love that? I mean, you got to love Paul for it. You got to hate Paul for it, right? Last thing you want to hear is someone go, unless I told you so, right? Your spouse says, I told you. Told you we shouldn't have bought that car. Told you we shouldn't have done that. Told you we shouldn't have gone there. Told you, right? I told you so. Now, here's the thing. So remember I talked about you getting yourself into a mess, right? And how you feel like, so Paul's saying, listen, I told you so, you should have listened. You got yourself into this mess. Now Paul's in a mess, not because of himself, but they're in a mess because of themselves. Look at Acts 17, 22 through 26. I love these first two words, but now. I told you so. I told you shouldn't have done it. I told you. Like he's got to get that dig in there. Paul's human too. Paul's, told you so. Told you guys, but now. Listen, I want to hear those words. Yeah, I got myself in this mess, but now. But now, I urge you, he says, keep up your courage. Because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Underline that because we're going to talk about that in a minute. Is that I have this in your notes, right? This passage of scripture? If I don't do it in your, okay. Only the ship will be lost. He said, last night an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Tell me this. Tell me you don't need in your storm somebody to come alongside of you who has heard from God and tells you, don't be afraid. Tell me you don't need that. Not a one of you could tell me you don't need that. You need somebody to come next to you to tell you, listen, I've heard from God. I've been alone with God. I've heard from God. And God says this, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. He said, you must stand, Paul, you must stand. He said this, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. And God has graciously given you the lives of all you sail with. So keep up your courage, men. For I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. It's one thing to trust God if you believe that you're in a storm caused by someone else. It's another thing to believe and trust God when you cause the storm yourself. Will he still help me? The answer comes back, yes. But now what? But now, right? That's the past, right? But now, make the best choices you can now, right? I don't care what has happened in the past, right? I don't care what you've done to cause where you are right now. Are you hearing me? It doesn't matter. But now, you can make good choices. Now, you can make one good choice. One. Make one. And then make two. String two good choices together. Now. Doesn't matter what happened. Doesn't matter how many bad choices you made up to this point. But now, you can make a good choice. But now, you can move forward. But now, don't dwell on the past. Learn from the past. Let the past be your teacher. Don't dwell on it. Don't let the past bring you down. Learn from it. Move forward and make good choices. There's a saying, I've seen it on, I think it was on Instagram or something like that, or one of those social medias. It said this, it's impossible to drive forward while looking in a rearview mirror. It's impossible to move forward while you're constantly looking back. Learn from the past. Certainly learn from the past. But friend, you have got to, but now, make good choices. But now, move forward. Don't focus on the anxiety. Don't focus on the waves of the storm. Don't focus on those things. So I was talking to Pete about this. We were kind of discussing this a little bit. I was saying how, I know I've said this before, but you have got to, I was with Bud Norton actually. He was talking about racing cars. And he was saying that when you're racing, you have a tendency, all racers, talking about professional drivers now, even professional drivers, what makes them really good is all of us have a tendency to look at a place that we don't want to go. Another car, a pole, or whatever, right? We don't want to go there. We have a tendency to look at that, thinking that if I see it, I'm going to avoid it. But what happens is you end up driving to that thing. It's kind of like when we talk about when you're plowing a field, right? You don't look right in front of you, look out in the distance. And you look at a point to get a straight line, right? And so we need to not focus on the problems in our life, the anxiety and the waves. What do we focus on? I have three last points for us here. We focus on God, we focus on Jesus and his promise. I love the songs we were singing, right? Christ alone. That's what it's one thing we were learning through this whole study in Acts is that it's about Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus and on the promises of God. Make sure your hope is not tied to your condition. Where does your hope in when things get down? I hope that my prayer is that your hope is in God. Not that you understand everything, not that everything makes sense to you. That's the beauty about this. You don't have to have all the answers. My hope is in God. Well, that's kind of naive, yeah. It may be. That's all I have. That's all I have right now. My hope is in Christ. On Christ, the solid rock I stand. Because why? Because all other ground is sinking sand. This is it. This is all I have. That's all I have. I've done what I can. I've got rid of other things, and I'm focused on God and his promises. The next thing is you can do is I think it's not to be negative, but I think it's important, is to face the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario. Look at this. He said this, the ship's going to be destroyed. We're going to run around, ship's going to be destroyed. But I love the word that comes before it. What's the word that comes before it? Only. It's only the ship. You ever had a loved one in a car accident, and all you want to you get a hold of them? Are you okay? Well, I'm banged up. But look at the car. It's only a car. It's only a car. We face the worst case scenario. Paul faced the worst case scenario oftentimes. What's the worst case? All they can do is take my life. For me to live is Christ, for me to die is gain. Okay. That's it? That's all that can happen? Not so bad. Not so bad. If worse comes to worse, I want you to know this, worse comes to worse. Look at the worst case scenario, worse comes to worse, you're going to be okay. Do it sometime. Go through something. Well, what's the worst can happen? Well, we can lose our home. We'll have to move into an apartment. Oh, is that the worst? Yeah, pretty much that's the worst. Okay. I'm okay with it. Still have you, still have God. We're going to be okay. And the last thing, this may seem odd to you. Let me just finish with this. The last thing is I think we need to do in our life is feed hope. Feed hope. It says this, just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. Now you might be thinking, Jeff, he's talking about physical food. So am I. So am I. Listen, I've seen time and time again, I've seen somebody, and I'll go, wow, man, you've lost weight. And I don't mean they've lost weight in a healthy way. Like they're like bad, right? Bad. You've lost too much weight. And then you get in their story. What do you find out? Well, they went through a divorce. Right? Come on, you've all seen someone going through traumatic, bankruptcy or whatever. And what do we stop doing? We stop eating. We stop eating. When you stop eating, your body gets broken down, your body gets weak. Paul knew this. Paul knew this. Listen, you are a spiritual being and you are a physical being. You are both. They're together. Sometimes we need to feed ourselves. Feed ourselves, actually physically. I don't just mean with food. But how many of you would agree with me when you say, listen, when I'm eating healthier, when I'm getting exercise, when I'm sleeping good, the problems of life really aren't that hard to face. Anybody? Come on, all of you. It's the truth. You don't need the Bible. Listen, doctors will tell you the exact same thing. Eat a good, healthy diet. People get in problems in life, they stop eating. They stop taking care of themselves. They stop getting exercised. How many of you lose sleep? Absolutely. You know, sleep is so important. You know what they say? Listen to this. Studies have shown that less than 8 hours of sleep, okay? Medically, they can show that your body has less antibodies, less power to fight against cancer with less than 8 hours of sleep. So how much less? 7 hours. They've shown it scientifically, medically, that less than 8 hours of sleep. Now, it may be just a little bit less, but it's less. So if you get 4 hours of sleep a night, right? Listen, sleep is important. And so you need to learn what gives me good sleep. You know, you need to stay away from your computer screen, your phone screen, a couple hours before you go to bed. They've shown that blue screen affects your sleep. Are you looking at it right before you go to bed? Are you Facebooking right before you go to bed? Are you laying in bed on Facebook? Just telling you, it's affecting your sleep. Need to learn to take care of ourselves. Eat a good, healthy diet. Oh, it's easier said than done. I know it is. I know it's easier said than done. But listen, you'll do better in the storms of life. Because why? It helps to feed your hope. When I'm strong physically, right? When I'm strong physically and I'm getting the sleep I need, I'm rejuvenating my body, I'm eating good food, I'm getting exercise, it helps me to be able to have more hope, to build my hope, to be strong. Because y'all know it's true. Y'all know it's true, and when we face the storms, we have a tendency to go the other way. The last thing I just want to say is, I want to ask you is this. Paul was courageous during this time. And courage, I believe, is contagious. You ever been around somebody with a lot of courage? It's contagious. You get courage when you can be that for somebody else. I want to leave you with this question. Are you in your life and the people that are around you, are you an example of panic? Listen, I see some of you guys' Facebook pages. Are you an example of panic? Or are you an example of trust? Go look back through your Facebook. Look, see what you post. Ask the people that are close to you. What do you think about me? Am I an example of panic? Something happens. Do I panic right away? Do I think the negative right away? Or am I an example of trust and hope? Things looking bad. Yep, I know. It's okay. I know where my hope is. I know where my trust is. Here's the thing. I already looked at worst case scenario, and I'm okay with it. What's the worst going to happen? Worst going to happen is this. I'm okay with that. I'm still gonna live. I'm still gonna be okay. Are you an example of trust for those around you? I hope you are. Let's stand. Pray with me, okay? Father, thank you for this day. Because this day wasn't guaranteed to us, okay? Day wasn't promised to us, but yet we're here. We have this day. Just this day. I don't know about tomorrow, but today we have this day. No matter what's happening around us, no matter what storm we're going through, or maybe even someone we know is going through, we have this day. How will we live this day? How will I live in relationship to you this day? How will I live in relationship to others this day? My loved ones. How will I live in relationship to my quote-unquote enemies this day? Because this is all I have is this day. Father, we thank you for your Spirit that dwells in us. It's such a mysterious thing, and for the most part, we're unaware of the Spirit's presence in our life. Help us to be aware. Help us to sense the wind of the Spirit in our life in a miraculous way. Not one that we go around bragging or in a very personal way that we sense the wind of the Spirit. that it's so real it's almost palpable. God, help us sense your love in a greater way. And help us spread that love to everyone we meet today. Today. So when the storms of life do come, if it's not right now, when they do come, we have our anchor. And it's you, our solid rock. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thanks, friends. Have a great day.